Like I said, we're going for it, and we're going after it.
Well, then should we do that properly?
And I don't know exactly how he's going about it, which may be
Should we do that properly?
different thing.
Shoot him in the street name and feel like.
Should we do that properly?
It was just like, I saw something about a kidnapper in China.
It's now 4:30. I'm going to call the May 9th, 2017 meeting of the Moore Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion, please, concerning the agenda?
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That carries. Could I have a similar motion with regard to the consent agenda?
I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I have a question.
Okay,
I'd like to have item 12 removed from the consent agenda.
really? Okay. I'm assuming that you're asking that Mr. Anderson include that revision in his motion, which you probably already
I
did.
would include that
Okay.
in my motion.
I figured you would.
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. We next come down to customers to be heard and recognitions. Let's just do the recognitions. Let's just do this. This is the best time, this is the best meeting that we as a Public Service Commission get to have every year, when we recognize the young people in our community and the work that they did on the scholarship program. I, for one, I don't know about the rest of you, but I, for one, really enjoyed reading this year's applicants because there's something a little different this year, and that was fun to read. So Casey has given me some information that I'm to read, and I'll do that. Each year, Moorhead Public Service is a proud sponsor of a scholarship program which awards college scholarships to local students. As I introduce each one of you, Dave Anderson from our commission will present you with a certificate, and I ask that each recipient come up to the podium for their certificate and for a photo. Dennis in the back will be taking photos. Our first recipient, and we're very proud to award it to her, is Hannah Hendrickson. Hannah is being awarded first place in the MPS Public Power Essay Customer Scholarship Contest for $1,000. Her essay is also being awarded second place in the Minnesota Municipal Utility Association statewide Tom Bovitz Memorial Scholarship Contest for an additional $1,500. Hannah is graduating from Moorhead High School and plans to attend Macalester College to study political science. There's a couple of us up here who probably have that same degree, and it's good luck with that one. And Hannah is the daughter of Renee and Chuck Hendrickson. Chuck is a very familiar face around here, and you're going to need that $2,500 if you're going to Macalester. Congratulations, Hannah.
Thank you.
We're an endangered breed of these poli-sci students.
There's very few of us out there. Yeah.
Good for you.
I think it's all fake poli-sci. Anyway, I didn't say that. Alex Kaiser. Alex and I rode up in the elevator. I don't know if it was his son or with his father was with him, that we got a little confused on that. He's being awarded our second place MPS Public Power Essay Customer Scholarship Contest for $500. He's graduating from Moorhead High School and plans to attend the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities to study sports management. Alex is the son of Tom and Pam Kaiser. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Nothing positive about the U, huh?
Well, there's not much I can say about the U that I haven't already said. So, you know, it's that school 80 miles north of here that I consider more dear and clear to my heart. But, you know, what can I say? I won't even talk about the Gophers. So, were you going to say something? Is Andrew Hallbach in here? Okay, well, I'm just going to report at least that he did receive our award as part of the one of the employees. Chuck doesn't qualify as one of our employees. And by the way, just so if anybody out there is interested, we had no idea whose essay we were reading. It was all blind. And for anybody who knows me, I'm blind anyway. But congratulations. They were really very well written. We appreciate you taking part. Thank you. Okay? Won't we be doing his at another meeting? I just said we should. Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. You can certainly stay for the rest of the meeting. That's your choice. Okay. Bill, any old business?
No.
Okay. Members of the city council, what? You have old business?
I have a number of old business.
Okay.
Just a reminder to a few of the commissioners that I still need Bill's evaluation here. We need to get this done because of some time constraints that we have, so I'd appreciate you getting that to me whenever you can. Next item here, more of a comment here. I noticed in the billing that the remodeling should be done shortly, or is done.
Of the lab?
Yes, and when that is done, I think maybe we should probably take a tour, or at least have an opportunity to do that if we could.
We might want to invite members of the city council as well.
Yep, no, that'd be real good.
Yep. Another item, Bill, you may want to comment about the meeting we had with the XL customers on May 1st. We didn't see anything on that. Maybe a staffing update, if we don't have one, next meeting was available, as far as if we had opportunity to replace the staff that had retired or resigned. Next item that would be here, I noticed in the bills here, we had a number of large particular expenditures here for some, like Border States and Dakota Supply, and also RDO. I'm not quite sure how we go about making those purchases. So when you have an opportunity, if we have a procedure in place of how we get bids or whatever the case may be, because
Did you have any particular question on any of those?
Well, no, but more just the process, because they were close to $100,000 in some case, and with that being a significant purchase. I know there was a comment that on the payloader that was approved, but just a better understanding of how you go out and find the vendor or the suppliers that we go to. And then the same true with Border States and Dakota Supply. I know we've had long-standing relationships with those, but I don't know if you get bids or quite just a better understanding of how.
Well, let's do this. Are you prepared to answer those questions? Have at it.
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. On the payloader, start with that one, through RDO, that was actually on the state bid list, so we can just basically purchase directly from the state negotiated contract. So I believe it was just slightly over $100,000 for that one. On
Let me ask a question before you go any further on that. And I don't know if this is where you're going, but did we ever talk about a $100,000 acquisition of a payloader as a group?
It's probably in the budget. I'm not sure if we talked about it as a group.
So it's budgeted, but did we take the affirmative step to approve the acquisition of a $100,000 payloader? I'm just asking.
Yeah,
I don't recollect if we did.
it's in the vehicle replacement budget, so we have it's a line item. It would be a line item in the vehicle replacement budget, in the budget binder, if you want to go look. It's in there. It's a scheduled replacement, so the existing payloader we had was due for replacement, so
I think the short answer is no.
Thank you.
The longer answer is because it's in the budget.
Okay.
I don't know whether we reapprove items that have gone through the budget. I don't know.
Well, so that raises a question with me at the same time. In the past, at least, if I'll talk about the Ditch Witch. At one point in time that we acquired one of those, and previous commissioner, Dave Curson, was concerned that, just because we have scheduled something for replacement, I mean, what was the condition of this payloader that we replaced? And just because something pops up on the schedule, is it wise for us to go out and buy a $100,000 payloader? Where was it? How long have we had it? That kind of a thing.
It doesn't get replaced just because it pops up on the schedule. I mean, there's an assessment that's done on all the pieces of equipment that come through, and we do look at that, and the budget committee looks at that. We don't bring them up on an individual basis to take a look at the merits of each, but we do look at that from from administrative staff.
Well, I would assume it might be interesting for the commission at least to know what that policy is in terms of when we replace those kinds of items. I mean, just because the vehicle has got a few years on it or whatever, is ready to be replaced, or have the wheels dropped off. Is that,
Well,
That you have to know?
no, I think it's a significant purchase. I wasn't aware of it because I did not see it as a line item, or I didn't look through the budget for that particular expenditure. And I'm not want to take anything away from the budget committee here, because it went through the budget, we approved the budget, so in a sense it was approved here, but it's a significant dollar amount, and that's the only reason I just wanted a little better understanding of the process that is used to, when we make those significant purchases here. Because ultimately what the concern is that I know our experience, if we call vendors and just order something, you get one price. If you call and ask for the quote, you may get a better price. So that's what I wanted to just really encourage, that when we are making these purchases here, we are, if you will, I don't know if it's appropriate to say negotiations or whatever the process would be here, but we just need to be careful of the dollars we are spending because of the challenges we're going to face. So that's what I'm just more encouraging, that we just watch those expenditures.
I think it may not be a bad idea to at least look at the policy on that replacement situation as well.
Right, right. And we're kind of talking about two different things too, because we're talking about specifically vehicles and equipment, and then we're also talking about our purchasing policy maybe in general, because I mean, there is a purchasing policy in general. We have to follow state law. There's, we have to get quotes for everything, and if it's over 100,000, we have to get bids for things, and it goes through the council, because the council approves all acquisitions that are above 100,000, unless it's on the state bid. So there's a pretty significant process. We have a binder for this policy because, there's minefields there. We want to make sure we're doing it right, and we certainly can look at the schedule of replacement and all of that. So
more what I was looking, what you just briefly summarized, and I don't consider myself a new commissioner, but I haven't really had an opportunity to be, for any staff members, share that's what the process that we use here for it. So that was reason for more clarification.
And let me ask a question along those same lines. We acquired this from RDO, and you said that's on the list of approved vendors, correct?
It's on the state bid list.
The state bid list, okay. When we put out the specifications for the payloader, how many different brands were we looking at?
We evaluated several different brands. I mean, we could choose any number of brands that are on the state bid list in reference to the payloader.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that wasn't what happened one year when we bought a Ditch Witch, and that was an issue that a lot of people can remember. You had a question?
Well, maybe a question and a couple of comments. Has it ever been your experience, Bill or Chris or whoever, that in the competitive marketplace, even still, that our own bid process might have been a better result than the state? Is it worth exploring that?
It's possible, but you'd have to go through a formal bid process. I mean, we go under the state bid list. It's the same contract that MnDOT will use to purchase 150 payloaders. I don't know how many.
I see. Okay.
But I mean, that's how the structure is given for the bid list, as opposed to, if we bid it ourselves, we have to, I mean, there's a cost there, probably $2,000 to $5,000 cost just developing spec, and then the time it takes to put it together. It's possible, but.
Yeah. Okay. The other comment, John isn't a new commissioner by any means. He's been around for a couple of years, but I've been around for 5, and we haven't had a lot of conversations, especially about 100,000 and up kinds of purchases, except at budget. When we start looking at just line. But we have had some turnover. Chris is still relatively new. We'll be having a new commissioner joining the group here before too awful long. So it might be that we rethink how it is that we're just going about our business, based on what has been the pattern. because we do have new leadership, and it might be helpful if we just bring some of these forward so that there is at least a highlighted line on the budget that is being executed. So just a thought.
And just to give a little references to the purpose, I mean, this is the same payloader we use for snow removal, for water main replacement, so it's under heavy usage. I would say it's not being underutilized.
I don't think anybody sitting up here questions the need for a payload.
Right.
I think the question is whether or not we're getting the best bang for our buck.
Understandable.
Okay, and especially in a competitive bidding environment in the state of Minnesota.
In reference to the other question posed about materials, I can speak to the Ferguson invoice of, it was about $108,000. That was a competitively bid project, so we had 2 bids solicited for that project.
And again, Chris, that was my assumption here, that
Yep.
there was a bidding process here, but I haven't ever had an opportunity to visit with staff regarding, and that's, your explanation is, I'm comfortable with that. Just so I have a better understanding of what we use to make those purchases here for it.
Yeah, and a policy review is a good thing to do. We, a number of years ago, went through every policy of the commissions, put 2 or 3 of them on every meeting, and just kind of went through them and had a good discussion about it. Like I said, that purchasing one is probably our largest one as far as, we have parallel administrative policies along with the commission policies, make sure we're following the commission policies and state law. And so that one is in a 3/4 inch binder, because that one, there is minefields out there for purchasing. We want to make sure and do it according to state law and commission policy.
So are you suggesting I read that binder?
Well, you don't probably have that binder unless you
That's in the
requested
form
it.
of a motion, I'll second.
I mean, well, and I'm not saying that you should have read that binder. There's really probably a 1-page commission policy that says, general manager, comply with state law regarding purchasing. And then we put together the binder to make sure that we're doing that. And so you wouldn't really, unless you asked for it, and we'll certainly get you a copy of that, you can look through it and, it's a good set of policies.
The payloader will deliver it to you.
I'm afraid. I think we have enough legal counsel to review those instead of, an old gailing.
And it is a minefield, by the way,
Yep.
just so you know.
So, all right. But Dave did make a point here that I think is important. If you haven't given Chris an orientation yet, I think she made a comment at one of our last meetings that she still is looking for something towards that. And certainly if we have a new member coming on, there should be something in place for that individual as well, because it would be helpful.
Yep. No, that sounds, yeah. I mean, we did a little bit of that when we met with Chris, but yeah, we can definitely do more of that.
There are always going to be questions as new commissioners come on board, and the more information we can provide them, the better off. I mean, look how long it took you to,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah. I was just agreeing with you.
Well, the final item here, moving on. There was an article in the paper here, Moorhead hoping for millions in state help for wastewater fix. This is news to me. Haven't heard about this in any of the other meetings that we've been at.
Might be wastewater, though.
Wastewater.
That's what I'm saying, wastewater. But specifically, the article references Moorhead Public Service and visiting with Moorhead Public Service. So as a commissioner, I would have thought that we should have been aware that if Moorhead Public Service is involved in this.
That might have
that
been
just an error
that
in
might
the
have been the
article?
meeting that Mark was at. The state came around for a kind of a listening session, and we were at the meeting, not necessarily the reason for the meeting, but we were there.
And maybe just to clarify too, we don't do wastewater.
Right, we don't do
We
wastewater.
only do good water and electricity.
We're the clean water people.
Clean water and electricity, and we do that really well.
So that's just probably all the clarification that I needed then as far
Well,
as.
and Chris might be able to answer a little bit more about that meeting, so.
Yeah, Mark was actually in attendance of that meeting. Typically, those are more wastewater focused, but the same funding that we use for the high service pump station is administered by the Public Facilities Authority, and they fund primarily wastewater projects. However, if you score high enough, you can use it for drinking water. in the case of the high service pump station project, that was the first time we've ever used it. So there are applications for drinking water, but some of the money is more difficult to come by because its primary focus is wastewater.
Okay. Does that answer your questions?
Yes. Yep.
Ralph, you had a comment?
I have a question. There was an article in the paper about the bonding bills, all including the underpass, all versions of the bonding bills, including all versions of the bonding bill, including the underpass for Morit, which is good news. Bad news is that we have still not budgeted for the electrical side. Is that correct? Have we talked to the city about what their plans is to pay for the electrical realignment? Because water is taken care of, right?
Water is taken care of. Yep.
It's taken care of as
As
long as the budget is met, the budget item meets the city's requirements.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, I think the funding for the project would be $46 million, but the cost of the project is
So
60
Yeah, roughly
million?
about 60,000.
So there's a
60 million.
gap. And, water is included in that project right now, but I think what's going to happen is when they sit down to do all the evaluation of where the money's going to come from to make up the difference, there's going to have to be a conversation. Travis is talking to Bob Z right now about the electric side, but the water side, the design and the construction of it is included in the bonding.
But hold on, if the bonding is for about 75% of the total cost, doesn't that mean that we need to come up with 25% on the water side as well?
That'll be the discussion that happens. I mean, they may assess it. I mean, and maybe Travis is going to talk about that, because that was the conversation with Bob Z.
Who may assess it?
The city may assess it.
Okay.
Assess the cost, the additional cost, because they've got to come up with funding somewhere. And, the city manager is here too, so she could
We're not
probably
going to pick on
address.
her quite yet.
we're not gonna pick on her.
No.
I mean, if you get into too much detail, we'll probably have to go that route, but
Well, my main concern, my question really is, are we talking to the, as a group here between the city and the utility about those two pieces which are included, which need to be changed in the underpass, and for parts of which there is no budget?
Correct. Yeah, I had an email conversation with Bob, and it's still continuing, of course, discussing the cost that MPS, the electric division, would have based off the 20 21st Street underpass. Bob responded back with some comments on, yep, there is a gap, and we have to figure out how to fund that gap. And there's several options that they have to look at to figure out what's the best way to get that additional money, whether it's bonding, assessments, tax levies. I mean, there's several options that they got to look at and how they're going to figure out how to fund that if and when it gets funded.
And do you have the feeling that additional funding would then include those utility pieces, or is that something that would not be included?
The
Or is this in the discussion
electric
that-
division or both?
Well, potentially on both, right?
Take your pick.
Yeah, I think it's 42 million is what the estimate, that's what they requested, but I think it's a $60 million project, so. Excuse me. Part of that response back from Bob is we still need to meet, the conversation needs to be had probably between Bill, myself, Chris, and Chris Volkers, the city manager, and Bob Zimmerman as well, too. So we're still working on that discussion. Again, we don't know when, if it's going to get funded, so.
So what's the the most ideal timeline? Assume the money is given, is it a year out, is it 2 years out, is it 6 months out?
From my understanding with discussions with Bob, depending on when the funding were to occur, say they got funded by the end of May, I would anticipate they would want to start construction next year. It's going to take a minimum of 6 months to get their engineering plans back up to where they need to be with all the new changes and stuff like that. The plans they have are about 10 years old. So for the electric side of that, a lot of that relocation would need to occur prior to that construction because of all the digging that's going to occur in that area. There's about a year's time frame of us to get everything relocated. Now, that's all depending on the construction seasons and when it happens, but so we'd have to work on that too, but it's all time dependent on the funding and how the city's going to move forward with it.
But is it safe to say nothing's going to happen in 2017, this year?
I can't tell you. It's all depending on if they get the funding. And until they approve that bonding bill, it's in limbo.
Okay, your questions are answered?
Question and answer, yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's enough old business. Brings us down to members of the city council. How many of those questions do you want to field and answer?
I'll defer some of those to future conversations with Dr. Zimmerman.
Okay.
He's much more of an expert on that topic than I would be. But I do know that the project I don't think somewhat is the right word, is moderately shovel-ready. I mean, we have kept that project updated in the event that funding would be possible. So it's fairly shovel-ready and ready to go. We haven't spoke about that gap and how to fund that. We don't have any specifics on that. We have not spoken about assessing that, so I don't know where that information came from. That would be news to me. It's certainly a possibility, but there are other possibilities as well. I do know in the past, we had talked about a small contribution coming from the railroad, but that would be, your reactions are all I have to point to. You know that if that were to come through, it'd be quite small. But there are options. It wouldn't be, I don't believe it would be a one option fix. There would be multiple sources that would be used. Let's see, other announcements or other things I'd like to mention here. The HVAC system in the building. Bill, have you been kept up to date as to, Casey, as to the issues with the HVAC? Have you, I don't know if you've been kept in the loop on what the issues are.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
We talked about it at our staff meeting today, so.
Okay, all right.
They said it was 85 degrees in here a few days ago.
Well, and yes, last night it was freezing, so I came wearing a scarf, thinking I was gonna, now I'm sweating. From the information that was shared with us, a fitting was broke, so all of the technical jargon, you can correct me where I'm wrong here. A fitting was broke, is broke. Refrigerant leaked out. Boiler had to be turned off. The chiller is being repaired this week. We basically need a new HVAC system, or better yet, a new building.
So are we to assume that the rent is going up?
I wouldn't say that. That was an interesting observation you made from my comments.
Well, it should go down. The
But
system isn't working.
the HVAC system in this building, this facility itself, ranked very high on Steve Moore's, the study that he had done on the facility condition assessment report from a couple weeks ago. They looked at all of the city-owned facilities, the current conditions and the needs, and then ranked them, with priorities being given to the salvageable facilities and where you get your biggest bang for your buck. It was discussed that the sentiment was that we don't want to put a whole lot of money into this building because we believe we've used its usefulness, and that a different use may be appropriate for this building. Now, that's part of a strategic plan, and none of that has been we haven't solidified any plans by any means, but I do believe that is kind of the overall assessment of this building. Let's see, what else? LEC, the new law enforcement center, had a groundbreaking this morning. So that project is moving along nicely. There will be a news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. about Moorhead being back in the twin home construction business. We had some issues with building codes and sprinkler systems that made constructing twin homes not feasible in Moorhead or Minnesota overall. But those things have been changed, and so we're back in that business. And that news conference will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the new Dorothy Dodds Elementary. And I think lastly, I just want to announce that there is a new sidewalk policy ad hoc group that will be meeting. And I don't know how much of this is of interest to you all, but I know that when sidewalks go in, there are, sometimes easements that you have and whatnot. So if you have any input on sidewalk policy in the city of Moorhead, I would appreciate hearing from you. Our first meeting is not until May 31st, so you have some time to get back to me.
Ralph has a question.
Actually, not to you, but you mentioned back to the original project on the underpass that it's shovel-ready or quasi-shovel-ready. Are we ready as well from our planning with regard to electric and water when the thing spins up? I assume our plans are ready to go as well? No?
That's the most blank stare I've seen of it.
I know, look at that. I meant that to be a leading question. That backfired on me.
A very good leading question.
Totally backfired on me. Well, just dig a hole and put up some poles, right?
Yeah, good wish there.
You've been here how long?
From the electric division, we've got, like I said, we've presented you guys the route, or routes that we had as options for the project. We'd still need to finalize those. There still need to be some geotechnical probably done because of the foundations that need to be put in for those steel structures. That's probably a bidding process, of course, too. So you're probably looking at 3 to 4 months, maybe 5 months to get us to that, to get us to that stage where we can start constructing. And like I said, it's probably similar to what the city's timeline would be as well, too.
Would your trigger then be the grant of the funding? Would that trigger you or us to actually go out and go those next steps?
Yeah, I think there need to be some conversations, hopefully prior to that or right after the approval happens so that we can get everybody on the same page.
Because if I understand you correctly, you would have to go first, right? You would have to move the lines out of the way first.
Yeah, the transmission line would need to be relocated right away.
Yeah.
Or that had to be done first because of the foundations and the locations compared to the grade separation project.
So when you talk about being shovel-ready, our need for the funding of that is going to have somewhat of a priority.
Correct, yep. I think the city's plans, if I remember right, they're, like I said, they're about 10 years old, and I think they were at like a 90 or 95% ready, so that's where they're at. So they still have some engineering work that needs to be finalized on it, but for the most part, it's basically ready to go.
And then, Chris, with the water, you would go in once the project has started? Sorry to ask these detailed questions.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sorry.
With the water side, where we were incorporated in the original 90% plan, so they'd have to re-update all the utility locates, and there's a lot of phasing considerations in regard to the water that would need to be worked out because our river transmission line goes through there. We'd have to do it in the summer. We'd be without river water, which is 80% of our water supply in the summer. We'd have to be really thoughtful on that final bit of design. So there's a lot of work that has yet to be done.
So the river line goes through, and then a water main going south goes through as well, right?
Right, water transmission line, about a 20-inch water transmission line is also located in that corridor. So both those would need to be moved. And
Pretty spendy items.
yeah, we need to have some type of bypass so that we wouldn't lose river water all summer, maybe just for a week or two, something like that. But
That bypass has not been put on the drawing boards at this point?
not
that increase
some of those
the
final
cost?
design details weren't worked out back in when the plan set was developed.
When you gave us the estimated costs of the water side of this equation, did that include the cost of some type of bypass?
Those are really preliminary numbers.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the number may go up.
right.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Any further questions?
Nope.
Anything further, Heidi? No. Thank you for your report. Members of the Public Service Commission. Really? Yeah. Mr. General Manager.
Just a couple of items. In the general manager's report is a report that includes a policy on affiliations, and this is one that commission reviews on an annual basis. I failed to include the downtown group in the group of affiliations that are approved by the commission. The reason why it's important is because then when the budget committee did go through it, did fund it, but it's not included in the policy on affiliation. So when it comes through to approve, I really can't approve it unless it's part of that. So if you want us to bring it up when we get the request, we could do that, it's in the budget, you could approve it at that time, or you can approve a revision of the policy. That's kind of a good example of how our policies tend to work, like in this case, so.
David, do you have a question?
Bill, would that be a simple motion to
You could change
add
the
the
policy,
organization?
just change the policy to include the downtown group in our list of affiliations, and as long as we've got in our budget, then I would approve it when the bill comes.
Okay, okay. If that's the case, I would move that we include the Downtown Moorhead Incorporated organization in our list of affiliations.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Downtown Moorhead,
Yes, Inc.
Downtown Moorhead Inc.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Anything
Thank
else?
you. And then the Excel customer update, we had a meeting on May 1st, last Monday, with all the customers, or we invited all the customers of Excel. We had about 25 customers or 25 people that joined us and answered their questions. Probably the biggest questions included, what is the timeline? And we went over that, and you may want to hear that again. Travis would be able to give you a little highlights on that. And then, not a lot of other questions, probably in specific, maybe some questions about streetlights, that type of thing. Seems like streetlights last year was a big item of discussion, but I think the timeline was probably the biggest one.
Would you like to elaborate, Travis?
Sure. Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. So through that meeting, we talked about the timeline on the construction side of it. Currently, we can actually take over about 70 customers. Now, we're still waiting on some approvals from Excel, legal counsel or Excel, to transfer those customers over to the Moorhead Public Service electric system. Now, we can do that because of all the work we did in 2016 with the Red River Valley Co-op transfer of service portion of this project. Construction has already started on the other about 100 customers or 100 residents that we can take over, or services we can take over. That will, hopefully in the next 2 months or so, we should have all that construction completed, pending we don't have any delays or anything like that occur. Anticipating hopefully completing all the transfer services by the end of August. Again, that's all dependent on finalizing the agreement with Excel and being able to take those services over prior to MPUC approval.
Answer everybody's questions. John?
Well, more of a compliment here. I was able to attend that meeting, and Mark from Excel was there. And from just listening to Travis and Mark visit with each other and explain how the process worked, I think we should compliment Moorhead Public Service staff and who all worked on that, because there was a lot of cooperation, a lot of foresight in how to efficiently make that transfer, because there was a couple questions regarding along Broadway and about how the utilities cooperated to get this done. I think was I think the people there felt real comfortable that everybody's looking out for their interest here, and were comfortable that their service would be provided to them, and there would be minimal impact on them at all. So just a big thank you for that whole process that was done.
Yeah, it's a real good point, because Travis and Joe both worked with Excel last year real creatively, really, to get it ready for this year, so.
Yeah, no, and all of our staffs worked as well. We hashed out a lot of the details ahead of time with MPS staff and Excel staff, so everybody did a really good job of getting that coordination down, so.
And I understand we still have some outstanding questions with Excel Energy.
Yeah, we intended to go into closed session, have Kayla here, hopefully approve the agreement, but we pushed it back 2 weeks. Locally here with Excel, we are getting along really well and have everything kind of in place. It's actually on their side where, their local staff is talking with their corporate staff in Minneapolis to try and, get on the same page, make sure they don't set a bad precedent or anything. Because it is a complicated transfer, this one, because we're different voltages. We're not accepting much of their equipment. They're looking at that and going, oh, this is different, so, which I think they're just getting up to speed. So we hope in 2 weeks we'll be closing closing to go in and finalize the agreement, and then we can get a transfer date set and start moving on that right away this summer.
Yeah, yeah, part of the transfer date side of that too, it's going to be a lot longer process. Last year, it only took us 3 days throughout a 2-week period to transfer everybody's services. This is going to be more of a service by service or transformer by transfer of service from MPS, or from Excel to MPS. So it'll be a lot longer process. It's going to take probably a couple months to get everything transferred over.
You may, Bill, I agree with John. Thank you for all the hard work, Travis, and for your entire staff. Bill, you might want to give Ralph and I some additional information as the status of those negotiations with Excel.
Sounds good. Yep. Final item, and thanks to John Regala, because we had a nice article on WDAY talking about Capture the Sun. So a little bit of a Capture the Sun update. As you know, 2 years ago we started the program with 2 arrays that were subscribed to by about 144 panels in 2 arrays. There's 72 panels in an array. So first year we did 2 arrays. Then last year we did 1 array, and we kind of wondered, okay, are we saturating already? Well, this year we're doing 4, maybe 5 arrays. Now we have money in the budget for 4 arrays, so if we do end up, we've had a strong response from the institutions in town, MSUM, Concordia, and Clay County for their new law enforcement center have all committed to an array each, so 72 panels each. And then, of course, we sent customer letters out, and we've received enough to basically subscribe 1 unit at this time. And of course, they're going to continue to come in. We'll have to decide if we're going to put them on a waiting list or if we're going to do a 5th array for this year. So 2 the first year, 1 last year, 5 possibly this year. So pretty good response for our Capture the Sun project.
Anything further?
Nope.
That will bring us down to item number 9, which is to approve artwork finalists for the Oakport Water Tower recoding project. And I've got to say, as I read the content of the memo on item 9, it does not jar necessarily with my memory of what we did and did not do. And I thought, at least it was my impression, that we were going to wait for the Art and Culture Commission to simply bring us the results of their deliberations, at which time we would either say, yes, this is a fascinating and wonderful project, or no, we're not impressed. So I'm somewhat, I see Sue's out there too. So I was somewhat confused by that.
And first of all, you know, Chris Thompson has been involved in the committee. Unfortunately, she's not here tonight, so we'll try and, in her absence, give you a report. Chris and I attended the Arts and Culture Committee meeting where they unveiled, you know, some of the, or well, all of them. And we should talk about the process because the time frame is tight. And if the commission is not comfortable with, you know, having the Arts Committee to do, you know, do a, some kind of a public ranking of the contestants, if you will, or the paintings, and the commission wants to do that, that may actually help the timeline. But I think you should take a look at it and decide. Is there other questions? I mean, because basically what we've got outlined for you is to take a look at the artwork, and I think what we intended to do was to take those and submit them, have it submitted to a public vote.
A little bit of,
Maybe
yeah, a little bit.
help me out there.
Yeah. So basically, just backing up a little bit, just to kind of tell the story, on October 25th in 16, the Arts and Culture Committee were authorized to kind of explore artistic designs for this project. So we went through a long public input process whereby we had some open houses. We put out quite a few mailers and tried to get some public input for the project. Finally, we did do open solicitation on City of Moorhead's website for artwork, and we received 9 finalists. The meeting Bill alluded to was the kind of winnowing down process of the finalists. So we took basically those 9 finalists and winnowed it down to about 4. The intent at this point is really to approve those finalists for further development. So right now they're at a conceptual basis. There'd be quite a bit of effort that would need to be done between now and the next commission meeting in June to really finalize those artistic designs to something that could be put on the tower. And Sue is here and would be able to speak to that process a little bit more effectively. But from our standpoint, we haven't developed a budget for any of those particular options. There's no cost implications. There's no full design yet. So we still have some work to do. Our intent is really to have you evaluate them as finalists for consideration, at which point either a community vote could happen, or on the 13th you could just approve either the winner or no artwork. Speaking just briefly to the financial component of the project, was a big concern that has been addressed early and often in this process. A piece of good news was that the city, via the Arts and Culture Commission and a lot of work by Kim Satrowski, was able to get a $10,000 grant relative to the project, and I believe approved it last night, subject to your ultimate approval on the artwork option. So in terms of cost, it's likely that we would have enough cost available to fund the artwork at this point. You'll remember that MPS committed $15,000 or the cost of a traditional logo towards the artwork option. However, there's still some detail that needs to be worked out.
Just quickly, Chris, what is the timeline and how squeezed are we getting the work done during this year as we march into June and July?
Right, we're pretty squeezed. So actually, we just had a pre-con last week for relocation of cellular equipment off the tower. So we're already starting the process for the project.
Okay.
The tower painting itself and sandblasting will start right away in August. We need to have the design selected by that June commission meeting. We have to have it. Otherwise, we will delay the project. So we have between now and that June commission meeting to decide what the artwork option is going to be.
Thanks.
I see that Sue Leggett is here. Sue, if you'll identify yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Sue Leggett. I'm a member of the Arts and Culture Commission and I guess the chair of the Tower Art Committee. Yeah, as Chris mentioned and as you picked up on, the timeline is rather tight. We have previously, the plan was to bring it to you to approve the final concept designs, and with that approval, it would go to a community-wide vote, and then for a ranking with a final approval in June, going directly to the contractor to be put on the tower. A couple of things I want to point out, keeping that process in mind. In your packet, you have the 4 designs that the process narrowed down. I want to make sure it's understood that submittal number 4 and submittal number 5, it was agreed upon by the committee that we were going to go back to the artists and ask if those 2 individuals would be willing to work together to merge their designs into one final design. Everything you see before you, we should consider a concept design. A couple of things that need to be addressed is the way that the design on is it the bulb? The bulb of the tower will be integrated into the stem. I'm learning the language. So we have to consider how the bulb and the stem will be integrated with the design. We have to consider design as a 360 degree and how it'll flow around the tower. And then finally, altering the design so that it is appropriate for what we have available in the budget. The first submittal number 3, for example, with the Huron, if you look at its wings, there's quite a bit of detail. That's going to have to be simplified. So just to provide that example. So in the application for the artist, when they submitted, there was language that said that all designs, if shortlisted and making it to this point, all of the artists will work with a designer to make sure their designs fit the budget and make sure that they were appropriate. So the artists knew submitting that there could be additional alterations made, but we also made it very clear in our intent moving forward is that that will be a collaborative process, that we will not be changing the artist's designs without their involvement the entire time. So what you have before you are 4 designs, which will immediately get narrowed down to 3 designs. And then those will be, as I said, adjusted accordingly to suit whatever restrictions we have before getting presented back to you or going to a community vote. If you wish to forego the community vote, an option could be for us to bring the 3 final designs to you in June. You pick the one you think is most appropriate, and it's done.
I don't remember personally that we were going to have a community-wide vote. I thought we were maybe going to look to the people in Oakport Township to see what they felt best fit in, and maybe you've already done that, you know.
We did have a few members of Oakport come to the open house, and several residents of Oakport, especially those that live directly adjacent to the tower, were invited to be on the selection committee. I don't believe anybody took us up on that offer. So,
My biggest concern is going to be whatever we put up there, if we put something artistic up there, is that it's legible for people driving by. It's got to be very clear that this is for Moorhead. What would you like out of us tonight?
I think the next step is we need approval on these 4 concepts with the understanding that number 4 and number 5 will be merged together. And if you want me to explain that, we appreciated the visuals of number 4, but we also appreciated the inclusion of the skyline in number 5. So I think the plan working with those 2 artists is if artist number 5 is willing to work with artist number 4 to develop a skyline and how that could become a 360-degree element of the entire tower. So I guess approval of this so we can move forward and start working with those artists, and that would also give us approval officially on the grant. Am I missing anything?
I think the grant process, we'd have to wait until you select artwork for that grant to be finalized.
So
And
if
we'd
we're already
have
under
to
the gun,
have,
that would make the community vote probably, that would probably pose a delay that we don't want, I would suspect.
right. I would say if we're not interested in doing a community vote, that would streamline the process and help us along.
I have an idea about that, if I may.
And that comes as quite a surprise to me, but go ahead.
I have an idea about that. I tend to resist, trying to put it out to vote because I see campaigning and, one group of friends of an artist versus, I just think it's our responsibility to make a choice. And Sue, I tend to, I gravitated right to the 2 pieces that you would like to see the artists combine their work anyway. I think it's much more illustrative of our community than the other ones. The boat's great and so forth, but it's a single element, and what is coming together with these other 2, I'm no artist, but my mother was a great artist. I think we could narrow it down tonight, actually.
I tend to agree.
And that we could say, go back to those 2 artists and go to work on this, and then bring us something in June that is presentable toward execution. That'd be my suggestion.
Before you go any further, Ralph?
I agree with Dave. I also gravitate to those 2. Not that it makes any difference, but one thing I would like to discuss or maybe propose is one of the things we had talked about is that specific water tower being in Oakport, we want to put something Oakport on maybe as well. And maybe as you go back to the artist to talk about the skyline, maybe there's something Oak Portish, maybe it's the paddle wheeler that's being, whatever, that we can maybe put in there, so that we have an acknowledgement of our Oakport citizens, or formerly Oakport citizens, that, you know, we recognize the fact that there is a history there.
Yeah, and that was one of our concerns as well, and I think the design that best sort of represents that is number 3, submittal number 3, and you can read from his the artist texts, that Oakport was considered as a unique element to the city, and they tried to bring that through with the inclusion of the Huron and the cattails.
Yeah. My issue, to be honest, with number 3 was that's a great water tower for the state of Nebraska, but maybe not for the city of Moorhead. But anyway, that's my
Driven
opinion.
across Nebraska?
Have you seen the cranes? Yeah, that's my point, right? So anyway, but I agree with Dave. I think we can probably make a short list here. I mean, let me ask the big question, right? I mean, are we okay paying the water tower?
I think we are.
Right.
I am. I mean, if it's an acceptable design, I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm a little put off that Les Baki's face doesn't appear.
I know. I was looking for the smiley face, but not going to happen apparently.
I think, speaking on behalf of the Arts and Culture Commission, or them and the Tower Art Committee, like, we recognize that the timeline is tight, and we have discussed briefly the possibility of eliminating the community vote. We haven't talked it over very much. But I do want to point out, since it sounds like you're leaning towards the idea of combining 4 and 5, I just want to make sure that you understand that in terms of all of these designs, that's probably the one that's going to be the hardest to anticipate what the final absolute design is going to look like, because it is working with 2 artists and combining their ideas. So, I mean, I think, especially because of the timeline, if you feel confident in making that decision, I think we would feel fine moving forward with that, as long as we all understand, you know, how things might alter with the design.
Mr. Rodala?
Okay. Just a clarification, so we are not looking at 2 separate designs on, we're just going to have all 360 here on the water tower. I don't know if any of the other commissioners were there when we first met with the people of Oakport, but my memory is that we said we would have an Oakport theme or try to achieve that, and that we would bring that back to Oakport for their review and input. That's my recollection. So if that's what we actually committed to, I think we have an issue if we're going to go around that.
Okay.
So that's something we need to get clarification, if that was a commitment that was stated or implied or
What Sue said
whatever.
a few moments ago, there were people from Oakport that did appear or were party to some of your early discussions, and they didn't really partake in the remainder.
Yeah, at the open house, there were some people there from Oakport. They were not necessarily opposed to the idea of art, but they were concerned about what they would be seeing out their window every day. So their the main thing that they expressed was they wanted the tower visually minimalized as much as possible. Like, they wanted it painted solid sky blue with no Moorhead, no logo, no nothing, just so it would blend in and they wouldn't see it, which is understandable because they do live very close to the tower. So I understand that concern, and I think if it's possible, if we do want to reduce it down to 1 design, maybe because of the timeline, if instead of altering 3 designs, focusing on 1 design, that might allow us to get it faster through the process, so we could have a community vote or something where we get feedback before the June meeting for final approval.
Just to address, if we're talking about the same gentleman that's there, he said he is the one who lives right next to it, and he was adamantly opposed to anything.
Yeah.
So there was some input as far as a preference not to have anything at all. So I guess however we proceed, I just want to make sure we proceed as how we told the citizens of Oakport that we were going to do, versus change it because of a timeline.
David?
John raises good points, and you know, I guess particularly because of just the recent annexation. We should be sensitive to the sense of identity that that neighborhood continues to have. I'd like the two, to be combined, but I suppose maybe I'd like them a lot better if they were out here in the park by the river, that one, whichever one that one is. But are we going to be creating an alienation up there if we plaster Moorhead on the Oakport, billboard? I mean, it is a very significant structure that people see, and the annexation is recent enough, and their sense of identity to their neighborhood is pretty strong. But particularly, they are not participating, and so I'm puzzled and concerned about proceeding if there has been just such a light interest in this thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I also think, all of this can be, again, if you decide to go forward with one design, all of this information can be brought back to those artists, and as we work to finalize the design, we can put more emphasis on how to incorporate Oakport elements. So like you said, adding to the skyline something that is unique to the Oakport neighborhood or featuring it in some way. And the theme of the call for art was life in Moorhead.
Yeah.
And that was the theme that the Tower Art Committee came up with. If we want to, we can we can discuss integrating Oakport neighborhood or Oakport region or something.
Was it your committee's expectation, though, that each of the towers would end up having a distinct design so that we would be seeing something different throughout the parts of the community?
We've been operating with the understanding that we had approval to look at the Oakport Tower alone, with the hope that you would give us approval to pursue the other two and upcoming third
I like
tower.
your understanding, so.
We've been working on this for about 4 years, too.
If that's the case, then actually the two combined pieces so far would be a very downtown-oriented or center city-oriented design. And in that case, then I'd withdraw everything I said earlier, because then I think we're poking them in the eye. The Oakport neighborhood probably really ought to have something that is a little bit more closely identified
Number 4 might be
with
closer to anything in that regard, because you've got the Yumkum Center, of course. You've got what I'm assuming to be fields separated by the Red River, and there are fields out there. And you've also got our wind tower. And to me, that sort of incorporates a bit more. The next one, number 5, submittal 5, is truly Center Moorhead, and those are classical. Everybody's going to recognize each one of those items. There's no doubt about it. But I tend to agree that what we do want is Oakport is now part of Moorhead. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We will have something on that, whether it's just the word Moorhead or something more indicative of our community. And
well, one of the since you brought up the remaining towers.
I didn't bring that up.
I did.
David brought that up. And we quit listening to Dave a long time ago.
This idea of really paying respect to the Oakport area as a unique aspect of Moorhead. I personally think submittal number 3, because it does focus on the wilderness of that particular area of our community. Moving ahead to the other towers, once this design is finalized, we can put out other calls for art using this design as the inspiration, so they model their designs off of this one, or we go back to this artist and ask them to create number 2, 3, 4, and each tower has a similar aesthetic, but addresses an element appropriate to each tower.
May I ask the rest of you a question? How important is it to us that the tower says Moorhead on it? That's a part of my concern that we're pushing off into that area and we're putting Moorhead.
For me,
on
that specific one because it's so hidden anyway. I don't think we need to have more on it. I mean, if we talked about the interstate one or the one at Woodlawn, absolutely plastered right on, right?
Yeah.
That one up there, I think is not that important, and especially when you look at the history of the annexation. Now, the thing is, it's going to be up there for 25 years, right?
Right.
So are we okay with a water tower that says, that doesn't say more on it for 25 years? Heck yeah, I don't care, right? I mean, I do care, but
I'll be dead.
no, you won't be. So anyway, but that's, I mean, that's, to be honest, that was the first thing when I looked at all these designs. The Moorhead is right in your face, right? And that's a good thing. I'm proud to be in Moorhead, but that water tower is in an annexed area.
You're sort of getting a mixed message, aren't you?
Yeah, you are.
Well, discussion's good.
I mean, this is, as I mentioned kind of jokingly before, this is going on 4 years, so I'm just thrilled that we're at this
Well,
point.
this part is new to us.
Yeah, right. I think all of these are great concerns, and I think all of them are things that we can further address through the design process and hopefully resolve.
Does this resurrect any of the proposals that have been set aside?
No.
Okay. They weren't that great.
So Heidi, what do you think?
A lot of them didn't meet the basic criteria of reduced color, no gradations, things like that.
So as you leave here today, do you know what you're going to do on your committee or what you're going to say to these artists who've all spent a great deal of time? That's obvious.
Well, as an artist myself, I know the biggest part of being an artist is accepting rejection. So you can spend 100 hours on something that goes absolutely nowhere.
It's in the mind of the beholder, after all.
I am an
Yes.
artist.
So I think how we proceed and what we say to the artist depends on what your decision is tonight. If you would like us to continue all 3 designs to final concept to final design, if you would like to approve 1 design to move ahead or 2 designs to move ahead,
Well, you just had a major concession, at least to the point of, I think we've got an idea that Moorhead doesn't necessarily have to be on it, which is a big change. And that probably opens up your canvas quite a bit.
It does and it doesn't, really. If you look at the, submittal number 3, for example, Moorhead is relatively, it's integrated into the grass.
Yep.
Whereas let's see.
4.
Number 4 is really in your
Whereas
face.
number 4, it's very prominent. So it depends on the design moving forward. The other thing, too, is if we're considering the possibility of the future towers and how we want to do those, if in the end we'd like all 4 towers to feel like, they're related and each, they're part of a group, then we should consider how Moorhead is put onto the first tower, because we're going to want it, as you said, on the other towers. So if the word Moorhead is an important part of the design on the future towers, and you want them to all have do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
It reminds me of when we picked out a logo a long time ago. Yeah. And that was a difficult discussion.
Question for you. We talked about middle 5 would be appropriate for like downtown. So it tells us what downtown is about. So as an Oakport resident, if we have number 3 on our water tower, what is that saying about Oakport? You have, and again, not to be, I guess, negative here, but it appears it's a heron in the swamp. So is that what we're telling Oakport, that they're part of the swamp? Because when you have somebody who's not from the community and they drive by and they're going to look at that, what is their comment going to be, or what are they going to say, or what is that supposed to represent?
Yeah.
Well, that's a better term. Yes, that's a lot better term here for, and maybe that's accurate, because if you read the depiction and the description of it, I understand that. But when you're driving by and you see that, you're not going to have that explanation of what we're trying to depict there. So it's a question more than anything else, because I think the direction that we're going is, we're all in support of doing something, but we want to make sure it's appropriate for Oakport.
And that's probably valuable input for the artist. You know, the artist could revise.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, all of these comments, depending on how you decide, we can take back to the artists and adjust.
Madam Duran, do you have a comment?
I do, maybe a question. From what I've listened to, it sounds to me, if I'm hearing you accurately, that you liked submittal 4 and 5, but you thought those might be more appropriate on a different tower. That submittal 3 would be perhaps most appropriate for Oakport, but wanting to go back to the artist to talk maybe a little bit more about his or her description, where they talk about prairie land, farmland, abundance of birds, lots of fauna. It's a blue heron, but you know, he or she talks then about all the birds that they had spotted in that area. Is what you're saying, and maybe to remove Moorhead from the green down there, are you suggesting or recommending Sue go back to the artist of that design and say perhaps encompass a little bit more of what makes Oakport unique? Are you specifying that submittal?
I think that's what I'm hearing, Heidi.
Because I think it would be helpful for Sue to hear that from you guys.
And John's comments are very true. We did want to reflect Oakport Township, and same thing. And I don't know about the blue heron. I have not seen any in this area.
Oh, they're there. I see them at the meadows, in the meadows
See a lot of
ponds a lot.
turkeys, you know.
Well, that's North
And
Moorhead,
I'm
though.
not
That's not
including anybody
Oakport.
sitting up here, pardon?
That's North Moorhead,
I
that's not
understand that.
Oakport.
Okay. And I agree with that. But does that help you?
I'm still a little confused if you're planning to accept one design to allow more time for extensive adjustment, or if you're planning to approve. It sounds like submittal number, whatever the other one is with the Yamkomst,
I think-
hasn't really been discussed at all, so it almost sounds like that one's being not approved.
I don't see that one.
Does this require a motion, or shall we just by consensus say, why don't you go back to your artists and take
I'd like to leave it to
the
you.
feedback?
Well,
You know, is this
that,
valuable?
that sounds great, but the timeline again needs to be brought up.
Okay.
And Chris can.
For all three?
Just for number 3?
Yeah.
No, I was thinking all of the artists, but, you know.
Including the boat?
And
So-
deleting the boat. Is there a motion to delete the boat?
So the initial proposal, or what we brought to you initially, was taking these concepts and approval of, if you wanted to approve all 3, and then taking them back for some tweaking with the artists. What we're talking about now is much more extensive than tweaking. So I would be very concerned about approving all 3 and expecting extensive adjustments, because the timeline won't allow for that. So if we want to do larger changes, I would think maybe choose one, we'll do extensive changes, and that'll give us time to kind of go back and forth a little bit more before going to either a community discussion or absolute approval.
I don't think you have time for community discussion.
But I
You have
think,
time for Oakport discussion.
Oakport discussion. I think we need to have an Oakport discussion, to John's point, absolutely.
Here's a thought. When you're looking at combining, you know, because we've been talking about combining 4 and 5, and we thought that was maybe more appropriate for downtown. Have you thought about, you know, talking to Artist 3 and combining that with 4? So you have a more rural theme, but you've got the design of number 4. So, you know, what I'm envisioning is, leaving the Moorhead in there, have the farm fields and the river, but on the top side, you have the sun, but you have a heron flying or
This is coming from a guy who likes
Green.
telephone poles.
Right. But then what happens then is you can take that one then, so 3 or 4 and 5 then for the downtown one, and you know, that would be a pretty good launch into your downtown tower. And there would be symmetry between the two. Now, you'd still go through the whole process, you know, and maybe have new, and I think you could actually have different colors, you know. I don't know about these colors, but, you know, because, I mean, I don't know, I just think.
I actually think combining number 3 and 4 could be a nice way to resolve all these concerns. And all of the artists, just so you know, all 4 of these artists were notified that they were shortlisted.
Yep.
And they all have accepted whatever decision and moving forward with the possibility of collaborating with somebody else.
So you are a professional artist here tonight, and you're telling us you're combining 3 and 4. You're going to guarantee us that whatever you do is going to be reflective of Oakport Township.
I guarantee nothing. No.
I'm assuming you've seen that face before.
Well, now we're getting personal.
Much as I would hate to go along with anything Bill has to say, though, but Sue kind of likes it.
I trust Sue.
Yeah, I trust Sue. So if 3 and 4 get together and collaborate, that might get us to the finish line.
The name Moorhead is not a necessity.
So just going back to what the conversation was when the Tower Art Committee met regarding number 4 and 3. Number 3, we really appreciated the attention to Oakport and the consideration of the wilderness aspect. And number 4, we were really drawn to the overall graphic nature of the design. Number 4, it was the skyline we appreciated.
5.
Oh, I'm sorry, number 5, yeah. So number 5, it was the skyline. There is a skyline sort of being integrated into number 4. If the proposal is to take the graphics of number 4 and the attention to Oakport and the nature of number 3, I think that addresses a lot of these concerns, and it's a nice solution. They're very different, and so collaborating with these artists is going to be interesting because it's clear they have very different design aesthetics. But I think the artists are everybody seemed pretty excited that they were shortlisted, so I think we should be able to get to a design that addresses everything you've been
Are we ready
talking
to
about.
just put it in Sue's hands?
Let me ask one more question, though. What's the absolute drop dead deadline that you have, Chris?
We'll need to decide at the June meeting.
So that's the first half of June meeting, right?
Yep.
Is that the end of
Be
June?
June 13th,
June
that
13th.
meeting, we need to decide on artwork.
Okay. So June 13th.
So
The interesting part of this discussion, I'll turn to you in a minute, John, is that initially, this was lukewarm up here, and I think that you're seeing that we are very engaged in making sure that if you can come up with something that fits, we will be 100% behind it, as long as it fits within all the other criteria, of course. John?
So if we can get this new design put together, it would be presented to us on the June 13th meeting for either approval or not. Could we then also send out a notice to the Oakport residents that we are going to have this meeting, we are going to be looking for input, and we would ask them to attend this meeting so we don't have to delay, we can get their response or input, and then we can make a decision?
we can definitely do that. Kim Satrowski, city staff member, has been great in online efforts for this project, so we've submitted, and we had a lot of solicitation for input. I think we could put out postcards to all the Oakport residents saying we're going to select a design at this meeting. If you would like to come, we can do that. That's feasible in the timeline we have.
And if we have multiple ways of contacting these people, because if I get a postcard, and I don't really pay much attention to postcards. So if there's other ways of contacting people, or put it in the paper maybe, or look at other possibilities of how we can give a notification to the people, because we don't want to have, well, I didn't hear about that, or I didn't look at the mail, or whatever the case may be. And then I'll leave that up to staff as far as what they think is the most effective way to get that information out. And then one more just clarification here, Chris. In the way how I read the response about the $15,000 from Ward Public Service, it almost read to me as if it was a grant that we were giving versus that we were going to share or apply the expenses that we would take normally for our logo and apply it to the design of the new logo. Is that correct or not?
In previous items, I detailed that a little bit more thoroughly than in this item, because
Okay.
we talked about the financial implications of that previously.
Okay. And I think that's something we want to just make sure we're
So our,
clearer on as far as going forward about where
So
that
this-
$15,000 is coming from.
at this stage, it's not necessary for us to take action on this item, I'm assuming?
We do need action, I think, in order to clarify.
Approve the artists?
Yeah, to approve the items that we're selecting as finalists, so that we can
Okay.
provide some clarity to the artists.
I don't know if that approval necessarily gives clarity, but if somebody's willing to make that motion,
So move.
is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
All right,
It's back in your hands, Sue.
don't mess it up.
Just a point, yeah, just a point.
resolution?
You have a problem?
You didn't give a resolution. Oh, I'm probably.
Yes, he did. Weren't you listening?
We put her to sleep.
I can see where Bolger fell asleep.
Made a motion. Just,
Would you clarify, would you be so kind
So-
to clarify that, Rob?
I moved for us to approve the 4 submissions that we got here in a packet as finalists.
As finalists?
Yeah, as finalists.
One,
No?
yeah.
Do you, if you're approving all
we
4,
didn't do that.
are you asking that we move ahead with all 4 designs, or the idea of combining submission number 3 and number 4?
Combining.
We're looking at combining.
So I'm going to change my motion. So let's take that off the table. So I'm going to move that we, what?
Nothing. I'm just listening.
So my motion is that we go to the artists of submissions 3, 4, not 5, 3 and 4, with the idea of combining the logos for the Oakport Tower that reflects more the Oakport history, and that we have a submission of the proposed logo here, or logos, if there are multiple versions, by the June 13th meeting.
And,
okay, so from 3 and 4, combining for more Oakport history.
Yep.
Okay.
and give notice. And give notice.
On the reserve.
Yep, and then I also move either in this motion or another motion that we give notice to the Oakport residents, appropriate notice to the Oakport residents of the June 13th meeting, inviting them to come here with comments and suggestions.
Okay. Does that meet your standards, Sue?
Chris?
Yes. That should be good.
Clarify that
Okay.
Yeah.
from Weston Point.
You got that now, Casey?
Yeah, but I didn't hear any of that.
Oh, okay, well, we're going to move on now.
Now, you having been here for a while, do you think that was one of the best motions you've ever heard? I thought so.
You're lucky
Okay.
he didn't speak German at the time.
It's coming next.
Fastest German in the world.
Was that the second that I heard as well to that motion? Yeah, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Brings us down to item 12, which is to approve the proposal for research associated with Phase 1 of the pilot filter skid study unit. That was the item you wanted off, John?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. It's more of clarification here, because if I look at the budget, this had been approved, that we would hire whoever to, so I'm confused as far as why this is being brought back to us to give, yeah, it was done last time, and that was included in the budget, and we agreed that you would find the appropriate people to do this, so that's just where I'm a little confused as far as, are we duplicating, or are we adding additional costs to the budget line? Because it appears that the $32,000 that was approved in the external lab testing Phase 1 is what we're doing here on this item.
I can speak to the budget on this item. This is because this is considered a professional service, or we considered it to be very near a professional service, and the commission has a policy whereby professional services need to be approved by the commission. So you've seen those budget numbers probably several times now, kind of a detail that we need to go forth with formal approval.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, John, you really need to read that binder.
Chris, thank you. I
In the form of a motion? Okay. Does that answer your question, John?
He did.
Could I have a motion to approve item 12?
I'll make the motion to approve item 12.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That brings us to item 13, which is to close the meeting for executive session. So the meeting will, yes?
Before you go there, if I could interrupt again.
Oh, feel free. This meeting is so out of control now.
Well, there was a lot of material to be covered, and I think it's appropriate that staff and community are aware that Moorhead received a wastewater treatment facility operations award. That was just recently posted, and I don't think that has been mentioned by you earlier.
No, it wasn't.
Which would be a failure on your part. So we should recognize our staff for doing an exceptional job.
When did I lose control of this meeting?
4:30. But to John's point, that's a really good point, because, I mean, this is another utility of the city of Moorhead, and they received an award, which is a big deal. So congratulations, right?
Yes, it is. To the city of Moorhead, absolutely.
I'm done.
Yes, you are. Okay, this brings us on item 13. The meeting will now be closed for executive session as permitted by Minnesota statute, section 13D05, subdivision 3C, to discuss transactions involving two separate parcels, number 58307-0110 and 58900-0260 in the city of Moorhead. Could I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And it's not known as to whether or not there will be action taken during this meeting. So if necessary, we can come back out and close. We're now in closed session. What the?
Thank you, guys.
We are back in open session. Could I have a motion, please, to adjourn our meeting?
Can you open the meeting?
I moved to
I
open
just
the
did.
meeting. No, you didn't. You have to move to
Gotta
open the
open
meeting.
from the closed session.
Yeah. Would you like a motion to open the meeting?
Yeah.
I so move.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Could I have a motion to close?
I move to close the meeting.
Okay? No, to adjourn.
To adjourn.
He does
I
everything.
move to adjourn.
For those of you at home, this has been a trying experience for all of us.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.